Hello and welcome back to my channel. Bonjour et re-bienvenue sur ma chaîne. I am Muriel and in this video I will be doing my April reading wrap-up. Yes, I am once again late with this because personal life reasons, which I talked about in my last monthly reading wrap-up and which I will touch upon again at the end of this video, bad mental health, etc. But so, in April I did manage to read 3 non-fiction books and 4 novels, and I will start with the non-fiction. So the first book of non-fiction I finished in April was The Birdway, written by Jennifer Ackerman. The Birdway is a book about avian behavioral and cognitive diversity and is a successor publication to The Genius of Birds by the same author, which I read last year and which also deals with avian cognition, albeit with a narrower focus. The book is divided in 5 parts, each focusing on a specific area of avian ethology, such as playing or singing, and marvelously showcases the complexity and high levels of cognition displayed not only by the heavyweights of the intelligent bird world such as corvids and parrots, but by a myriad of other species, though mostly from the songbird order Passeriform, so passerines basically. Most species discussed in the book are also principally from the tropics in general and Australasia in particular, because as you learn in the book, birds from the southern hemisphere tend to exhibit greater behavioral and cognitive diversity than their northern counterparts. You also learn that songbirds originated in Australia, I did not know this, and that migratory behavior in the north in particular probably impacted the behavioral range, so reduced behavioral range, of many avian taxa over time, narrowing it to what it is today. That being said, some northern species like the common raven, one of the most intelligent birds without a doubt, start in the book, and even though I was glad to learn so many new fascinating things about different species which I'd either never heard of or wouldn't have cared about that much otherwise, I was also very happy to see that there was an entire chapter dedicated to ravens, kea parrots, and their complex intelligent play behaviors, because I love corvids and I love parrots, so that was a yay for me. The only real nitpick I have content-wise is that I would have loved to see more said, or at least speculated about, regarding avian sexuality. Now, there was a part devoted to mating behaviors, including homosexual ones, for example, and very light discussion about emotions and the potential existence of love-like feelings in birds, just as there are in non-human mammals, but I would have liked more and more about the potential existence of avian sexual pleasure specifically, because I'm a weird nerd in that respect. Human and animal sexuality is one of my special interests, and I'm sure some uber nerdy ornithologists or ethologists are looking into this somewhere, and I'd like to know about it. However, when it comes to love, I do not need a professional scientist to tell me whether I shared it with my Lily, because I know I did. Finally, I really enjoyed the fact that this book was really all about the science and the research that has been and is being conducted by a large cast of different scientists from around the world too, with a minimal amount of personal anecdotes thrown in. This and The Genius of Birds feel like spiritual successors, if you will, and work as wonderful add-ons in any case to Attenborough's classic The Life of Birds, which is a definite plus in my book. I'm a big fan of David Attenborough, no one is surprised. I gave The Birdway a 9.5 out of 10, which I believe is a slightly higher rating than the one I gave The Genius of Birds, and while I would most definitely recommend both, I believe I preferred this second publication to the first and would thus recommend it even more highly. Next up, in April, I read When Brains Dream, written by Antonio Zadra and Robert Stickgold. When Brains Dream goes over what we know and what we don't yet know about dreams and their possible biological functions, both psychological and neurological, though in this case it more or less amounts to the same thing because psychology is wired through neurology, you get what I mean. It is written by 2 neuroscientists who study dreaming themselves, and the authors also take the opportunity throughout the book to present and explain their own theoretical model for why we dream, called Next Up. Don't ask me to detail the acronym though, because I've already forgotten what it stands for, but obviously it's said in the book. This book serves as a very, and I mean very, thorough overview of the subject of dreaming and the research conducted into dreaming. It basically covered everything I wanted to see covered, from the basics of sleep neurophysiology, the history of dream research starting starting in the 19th century, to the neurochemistry of dreaming, which varies according to the phase of sleep we dream in, because no, we do not just dream during REM sleep. It also addresses the role of dreams in memory and emotional processing, dysfunctional dreaming, such as PTSD nightmares, night terrors, or somnambulism, and lucid dreams. Like I said, the authors also present their own model called Next Up, and make a very convincing case for it by linking a few other hypotheses about dream function to it in several different chapters. Their style is moreover very accessible, never condescending to the reader, and they define and explain every concept present in their book clearly and concisely. Or at least as clearly and concisely as possible, given dreaming is such a weird and still partly mysterious phenomenon. So for me, this was once again a near perfect non-fiction book. The only reason I didn't give it a 10 out of 10 rating but a 9.5 out of 10 is 1, because I am a nitpicky bitchworm, we know this about me, and 2, because I would have liked to see a bit more written about the way neuropsychiatric disorders affect dream sleep and dream content, if it does in any significant way. There was quite a bit written about PTSD and nightmares, but I would have liked to see depression, schizophrenia, or even autism discussed in conjunction with dreaming, maybe in the future. I did learn about a condition called epic dreaming, though, that I'm pretty sure fits some of my own dreams, and which could perhaps partially explain why my own sleep is not very restorative, since I've always had a very intense and vivid oniric life. Beyond that minor nitpick, however, this was a great book about dreams and dreaming that I would definitely highly recommend to anyone with even a passing interest in the subject. In fact, I liked it so much I might bother purchasing a physical copy of it for my personal library because I read it in ebook format. And then I read Down and Out in Paris in London, written by George Orwell. I listened to this on audiobook because George Orwell is a figure my erstwhile partner David greatly admires, and he mentioned this book in particular to me a few times, saying I might enjoy it, find it funny perhaps, even though I hadn't greatly enjoyed the fiction I'd read by Orwell. As a reminder, I have read both Animal Farm and 1984. I have a review for the latter, and have several issues with both as stories. So Down and Out is what I'll call a journalistic memoir about Orwell's experience being, well, down and out in Paris and London in the late 1920s. The book itself was published in 1933. More precisely, George Orwell experienced being dirt poor, both with lodgings in Paris and working the most debasing job in a restaurant, washing dishes and things like that, and being dirt poor and actually homeless in London. Or I guess that strictly speaking he was a vagrant rather than homeless, since he spent his nights in abysmal communal lodgings meant for the homeless, colloquially known at the time as the Spike. The book alternates between straightforward and chronological narrative sections and chapters where Orwell goes into what I'll call essayist mode and shares his thoughts on poverty, vagrancy, and even the linguistics of swear words, which felt super tangential to his main material, but was very interesting nonetheless. The writing style reflects this, being straight to the point and very realistic. In fact, it reminded me of Émile Zola's writing a little bit, which isn't necessarily a plus given I've never liked his fiction, but to Orwell's credit, I'll say that the tone of his tale was lighter overall, or at least less depressingly bleak than some of Zola's stories, which, to be fair, did give accurate portrayals of their subjects at the time, but still. In all honesty, I was pretty bored during a lot of the book because its subject matter and story didn't particularly interest or enthrall me. And I stand by one of the conclusions I made after reading first 1984, then Animal Farm. I find George Orwell writes better as an essayist than as a storyteller, perhaps in part because of his relatively dry writing style and plotting choices, what have you. So it's no surprise the narrative largely failed to grip me here, even if it was mildly amusing at times, despite its relatively depressing subject matter. But Orwell does indeed shine as an essayist, and I appreciated the chapters where he shared his thoughts about poverty, the way poverty is perceived by different levels of society, vagrancy, work, and like I said, even a bit of linguistics. I also happen to agree with a lot of it, though at times I thought he could have used a pinch of more nuanced psychological analysis. For example, I personally believe that some people will look down or rather look away from the homeless, not because they think the homeless vile or inherently different and inferior to themselves, but rather because seeing a homeless person reflects their own fears of potentially finding themselves in a similar situation, and it makes them very uncomfortable. I definitely think this is a thing for some people, and those are my 2 cents anyway, and a debate for another day most definitely, but I'm just surprised Orwell didn't think of that at all, given the decent depth of the rest of his analysis. Now, this book did have a couple of more serious issues I must mention. One, there is quite a bit of anti-Semitism present in the text. It wasn't anti-Semitic propaganda encouraged by the author, just to be clear, rather anti-Semitic remarks made by some of the characters Orwell encountered during his experience. But still, it is there. And honestly, even Orwell talked about the Jews in a way that was a bit iffy, though ultimately it's probably an unfortunate reflection of the times he lived in, but I thought I'd mention it. And 2, there is quite a bit of sexism, even borderline misogyny in the text as well, and here it emanated both from the characters Orwell encountered and Orwell himself, and it left a sour but ultimately defeated taste in my mouth. Defeated as in, what you gonna do? Though I will note one passage in one of his essay mode chapters where Orwell lamented the sexless fate of vagrant men in a way that reminded me of incel speak, quite honestly, and the supposed ease women had avoiding homelessness when female homelessness is just an entire thing, and it was just particularly gross and disappointing. Overall, I did kind of enjoy this memoir. Somewhat. It was not a waste of time, but it's not something I would ever reread, and listening to it while painting my bedroom probably helped it go down more easily. So my 5.5 out of 10 rating accurately reflects what I thought and felt about it, and I don't really know whether I'd recommend this or not. This one is really up to you. I mean, it obviously always is, but you'll know what I mean, hopefully. Now moving on to the fiction. So first I read Whit, written by Iain Banks. Whit, and the book I'll talk about right after, The Wasp Factory, was directly recommended to me by my ex-partner David, and yes, despite what happened with him, I've decided to keep his books on my TBR and to read other books he mentioned when we were together so I can feel close to the version of him I knew and loved. Yes, it's a very dysfunctional coping mechanism, basically, and one I'll probably review sooner rather than later given recent developments. Anyway, so I plan on making a dual review for both Whit and The Wasp Factory in the coming weeks, so I won't go into too much detail here. I'll just give a brief synopsis and an abbreviated rundown of my thoughts for each of them. Firstly, Whit. Whit is a curious, fairly amusing, and definitely well-written novel that tells the story of Isis Whit, the 19-year-old elect of God of a small, relatively benign Scottish cult based near Stirling called Luscantarianism, as she goes out into the wider world of Great Britain to find her missing and believed to be lapsed cousin, Morag, before an important festival of love where she is supposed to be the guest of honor. Isis is the elect of God because she was born on the 29th of February, just like her father and her grandfather, Salvador Whit, who is the founder and overseer of her cult. I called the novel curious because I've never come across a story quite like this, featuring a cult that isn't stereotypically creepy or nefarious. Honestly, Luscantarianism functions more like a cross between a hippie commune and an Amish community than anything else, though there is a twist I won't reveal, and yeah, it was founded by one shifty white dude who married 2 sisters, so you know. But apart from that, it's relatively benign, like I said, and it features funny little peculiarities like local cuisine that mixes Indian and Scottish influences, or a special way to use the phone that is kind of like Morse code, because Luscantarianism is a Luddite cult that shuns most of modern technology. I also call the novel amusing because a lot of amusing situations arise from Isis's interactions with the outside world. She is quite an intelligent, resourceful, and highly educated young woman, but she's also very sheltered, having grown up in a cult and naive about some things as a result. The story is told from her sole point of view, and Isis alternates between narrative and introspective segments where she talks about her family, her cult, or her thoughts about God and faith. There is a mystery at the heart of the story, a family mystery more specifically, and this serves to move the plot forward. But the novel is also about Isis as a character, and I would say it's split pretty evenly between being character and plot-driven overall. I also appreciated Isis's thoughts on religion, belief, the divine, etc. They served as a nice sprinkling of theming to an otherwise pretty light-hearted story. So yes, I enjoyed Whit. It was different and fairly relaxing to read, and I managed to relate to Isis quite a bit. I gave it a solid 6.5 out of 10 and would recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. So while Whit focuses on an unusual main female character, Isis Whit, the Wasp Factory focuses on an unusual main male character called Frank Coldham. And unusual might be putting it lightly, because Frank is basically a sociopath. Indeed, the Wasp Factory follows 17-year-old Frank as he goes through his daily rituals and waits for the return of his half-brother Eric, who escaped from a closed psychiatric facility. Frank lives with his father, a bit of an eccentric himself, on a home island somewhere near Inverness. So yes, mental illness and weirdness, shall we say, run in Frank's family, but like I said, he takes the cake because he is, well, a sociopath. By that I mean that Frank killed 3 of his family members when he was still a child. This is not a spoiler, as you learn this in the book synopsis, and a lot of his honestly OCD level rituals involve killing small animals and manipulating their body parts. This includes wasps, fed to the Wasp Factory, and yes, you do learn what that is exactly during the story. I would say the Wasp Factory is even more character-driven than Whit, and more introspective in tone as well. There is a quiet atmospheric aspect to it deriving from its setting on an island in northern Scotland, and I honestly found my reading experience pretty relaxing overall, even though Frank is certainly a detestable character, misogynistic to boot, because of course he is. Yet, Frank is also fascinating in a way, definitely intelligent and thoughtful. I found myself relating to him at times, and I was reminded of my ex-partner David somewhat and others because of the weird loner vibes Frank gives off, and because of his sense of alienation from the wider world. But of course, one can feel all those things without killing other people or innocent critters. Frank is still profoundly disturbed at the end of the day. I enjoyed Banks' writing, as I enjoyed it in Whit, and the story was pretty funny at times in a dark humor sort of way, which is my preference. There is also a very satisfying end of plot twist, which I will not spoil, but which definitely enhanced my overall enjoyment of the story. I rated The Wasp Factory at a 6.5 out of 10, just like Whit, and would recommend both equally if you're looking for short-ish literary fiction that just feels different. Also be on the lookout for my dual review, like I said, where I'll draw some parallels between both stories and go more in depth with my thoughts about them. After those 2 Iain Banks novels, I read Foundation by, of course, Isaac Asimov. Last year, I watched season 1 of Apple TV's adaptation of the Foundation series, and I said afterwards that I would give the very first book in the series, Foundation, a try the following year, this year. And so I did. So the first book in the Foundation series to be published, not in the internal chronology of that universe, to be clear, introduces you to the main character of Harry Seldon, the founder of psychohistory, a scientific discipline combining elements from what I'll call mass psychology / sociology and big numbers probability mathematics. Today it would all just be subsumed under big data, I think, but I'll get back to that in a few minutes. And Harry Seldon predicts that humanity's galactic empire, which has been running for thousands of years, is going to fall, and sets up a foundation to preserve human knowledge and ensure the dark age that will follow the empire's fall will be as short as possible. The rest of the book then goes over successive crises faced by this foundation and the ways a successive lineup of extremely similar characters, all cunning outsider types with political acumen, deal with them over several decades, if not a couple of centuries. I'm not super clear on the exact timeline. The writing felt very dry to me and was all about delivering the plot, Such as it was, in the most straightforward way possible, the novel is divided into 4 parts, which correspond to the intro with Harry Seldon, the chapter's called The Psychohistorians, and the 3 crises faced by his foundation. You have the psychologists, the mayors, and then the traders. Those 3 parts felt extremely similar to one another and seemed pretty redundant to me. Honestly, I know this is a weird comparison, but it reminded me of the first 3 Testaments, because I did bother to read the New Testament at one point out of curiosity, and the first 3 of them basically tell the same story with slight variations. So I don't know, I was reminded of that. And honestly, it's a good thing I listened to this on audiobook, otherwise I'm not sure that I would have finished it. Character-wise, there really isn't much to say, and this is coming from someone who isn't the most character-driven reader to begin with. Foundation is quintessential textbook classic / old science fiction where character doesn't really matter at all. Only Harry Seldon really stood out to me, and even then, it was only because of the psychohistory he came up with. Salvor Hardin, a leader of the following foundation, only stood out because of his now iconic quote, "Violence is the last refuge of the incompetent." It's a very cool quote, sure, but apart from that, there wasn't much to distinguish him from the successive fixers of the Foundation's crises. Foundation is the kind of science fiction that's supposed to be all about the ideas, which I'm all for, but I was left really underwhelmed. Yes, psychohistory was a neat, even very neat idea, and like I said, you could think of it in terms of big data. If someone created an algorithm that predicts the broad strokes of future history based on it, that would more or less be psychohistory to me. So taking all the data from all social media, websites, emails, you know, all that data just floating around, and someone used an algorithm factoring in group psychology and stuff like that, that would be psychohistory, basically. And thank fuck it doesn't exist. Would it be a good thing? No, because we're not mature enough as a species to handle that kind of thing. But yeah, there isn't much of an explanation given for psychohistory in the text itself, which again, fine. I wasn't actually expecting Asimov to create it as a genuine mathematical model for his novels. I mean, that wasn't his job. He wasn't writing non-fiction about mathematics. But it doesn't mean that at the end of the day, psychohistory just feels like a variant of prescience. Speaking of which, Dune basically deals with the same core ideas of Foundation and a couple besides, but does it better in my opinion. Foundation deals with religion and macroeconomics as manipulative tools that help fashion the course of history. So does Dune. But Dune goes into way more depth with this in my opinion and has better world building and character engagement as well. If you think, and it's justifiable, that Dune is not a character-driven series, read Foundation, because that really takes the cake. Now, okay, I'm sure the world building and theming of Foundation as a whole is a lot more fleshed out over the entirety of the series, but I can't be bothered to confirm that. And the world building was fine here, don't get me wrong, but authors like Asimov are exactly why classic SFF has a reputation for sexism. I'm sorry. None of the main characters are female, of course, and women collectively are still basically referred to as housewives in an argument about economic manipulation. And I'm like, really? We're all still just housewives 10,000 years into the future? Damn! Like, even there, Dune did that better. And I had my issues with Dune, especially the last 3 books. Anyway, so yeah, this one was a bit of a flop for me. There are ideas there, but clearly one would need to read the rest of the series to really get to the meat of them, and I really don't care to. Not after Dune, not after the masterpiece that was Hyperion, not when there is awesome, better rounded, and more recent science fiction literature I should probably get to at some point. An example of that type of science fiction, Adrian Tchaikovsky. So no, I will not be continuing with Foundation. Sorry if that's disappointing to some of you. And I think I might have just slightly preferred the TV show too, honestly. I did give it a 6 to 6.5 out of 10 rating, whereas I rated Foundation at a 5.5 out of 10. Finally, in April, I read The Magicians, written by Lev Grossman. The Magicians is another book that was basically put onto my TBR because of my ex-partner David. I wasn't at all planning on reading this originally, partly because it had been compared to Vita Nostra, which I didn't like at all. But he told me he thought I might enjoy it, especially because of a couple of specific elements, and I did. In fact, this is the best novel I've read so far this year that wasn't a reread, and I will definitely do a dedicated book review for it at some point. So The Magicians follows Quentin Coldwater, a very depressed and intellectually gifted high school senior who finds comfort in a series of portal fantasy children's books called Fillory and Further. I'm mentioning that element because it is important to the overarching story, as he stumbles upon and gets admitted into a magical university called Breakbills, where he will study for 5 years to become a magician or sorcerer. I mean, they use all of the magical related terms in that book. Quentin hopes that becoming a magician will give meaning to his life, make him happy, etc. Fix him, basically. But will it really? Hint! No, it won't. The Magicians is another book I listened to on audio, and I have to say that the narrator did a fantastic job. It was just really enjoyable to listen to. He really made the story and the characters come alive, so that definitely enhanced my appreciation of the book as well. But beyond that, the prose was really good. Beautiful and metaphorical at times, quite literary, grittier and more sarcastic at others when it was called for by a particular character's voice, for example. There was also quite a bit of dark humor, which is generally what I prefer, as I've already stated numerous times, especially when I'm as depressed as I am currently. Just works for me. And there were quite a few enjoyable meta references to things like Harry Potter or the Chronicles of Narnia, but I'll come back to that. This novel gets fairly mixed reviews from what I've seen, and I believe this is mostly because of the characters. I personally really enjoyed most of the characters. Did I like them? I kind of liked them, I guess, but a lot of people don't seem to care for them because they find them unlikable. And yeah, okay, I get that. Quentin is an asshole at times, though certainly not a sociopath like I've seen some argue. So are his friends, but they are also very intelligent, funny, in a dark humor and self-deprecating kind of way, and depressed. Or some kind of mentally ill. The Magicians basically has great representation for intellectually gifted but mentally ill or arguably neurodiverse young adults, and I really related to that. I related to Quentin, related David, my ex-partner, and my previous ex, Philip, to a lesser extent actually, to him as well. I related to Quentin and Alice's very realistically portrayed relationship too, and I'll admit it made me very emotional at times. I teared up a couple of times listening to this. World building wise, don't go into The Magicians expecting everything to make sense. That's not the point. It features soft magic and draws parallels to things like Narnia or Wonderland, more so even than Harry Potter, I would argue, and people bring up Harry Potter a lot in conjunction with The Magicians, but Chronicles of Narnia might be more relevant, honestly. And all of those elements combined gave the story a darkly whimsical and absurd atmosphere. That's why I mentioned Alice in Wonderland, which in my opinion is what actually mattered rather than explaining the magic and things like that. What really made The Magician stand out to me was its main theme of mental illness, depression specifically, because even if Quentin never acknowledges it in the text in so many words, it was very clear to me that he was a very clinically depressed young man. And none of his friends at Breakbill seemed terribly mentally healthy either, like I said. So yeah, there was great mental illness, at the very least great mental unease representation in this book, through Quentin primarily, but not just him. The only thing that bugged me about it was that I felt Quentin should have been overtly suicidal at certain times in the story. Based on my experience of depression, what I've read about depression, he should have been wanting to die at some points in the story, just straight up. And he never really was. There's also more I want to say about the juxtaposition of Quentin's personality and suffering. In short, his arse-holish disposition, but I'll save that for my review. I gave The Magicians an 8.5 out of 10. I felt the story was sufficiently contained and resolved to a satisfying degree on its own, so I don't particularly feel the need to read books 2 and 3 of the trilogy, but I'm open to counter-arguments. Honestly, this is now the book I'll recommend to readers looking for mental illness/depression representation and thematic exploration in SFF literature. It was that good and that emotionally impactful. I'll briefly mention the fact that I watched the new teaser trailer. I don't understand the differences now because they're teasers, teaser trailers, whatever, for House of the Dragon, and I thought it looked pretty good overall. I obviously liked seeing a dragon flying over King's Landing because I love dragons. It's in the freaking title of my channel. I liked what I saw of the costumes and makeup. Basically, I think there's potential still there, though I do have some minor qualms with what I saw I might go into at some point in the future, given D&D are blessedly unattached to this project, given it is still HBO producing it, and HBO has a good track record, except for the trash fire of season 8, and given the story is based on completed literary material. And honestly, I am more hyped, if I am hyped at all, for this than I am for the Tolkienverse Rings of Power show at this point. But we'll just have to wait and see. Assuming they'll release a longer trailer before the release in August, I might just do a dedicated video to my expectations for the show then. Now I'm gonna get into my second and last personal life update. First, I want to say a warm and special thank you to those of you who expressed kindness, compassion, and support in the comments of my previous reading wrap-up. I am still struggling a lot, have felt very suicidal in the past month, and the grief and depression are absolutely crushing when I'm not numbed, evened out by medication. It is actually helping, at least in the short term, I think. So I'm going to give a last update about this whole thing, largely because I don't have any friends, nor much in the way of outlets for my thoughts and feelings, and I just need to do this for myself, bear with me. But after this, don't worry, I won't bother anyone with this type of stuff again, outside of relevant non-book content videos like talking about mental health in general, or my history with that, things like that. And of course, you can easily skip this if you wish. I completely understand if you're not interested. This is not the point of this channel after all. So, I did get more emails from my ex-partner, and he has turned exceptionally mean and cruel over the past month, has honestly transformed into a lying and worse, gaslighting monster of a person. The gaslighting is probably the worst thing. After being in a sexually and emotionally abusive relationship with a predator between the ages of 13 and 20, and an emotionally abusive one with my older ex, Philip, between the ages of 23 and 29, who is also gaslighting. Because gaslighting is part of abuse. Though my ex-partner David was not abusive with me while we were in a relationship, I do want to stress that, but he has turned emotionally very cruel at least. My partner, my ex-partner, whom I still believe was a soulmate while our relationship lasted, has now become equally emotionally cruel to those two previous people in my life. Though again, he was not actually abusive towards me at any point during our relationship. He went from being, again, the sweetest, most loving, most attentive person, my insanely compatible, nerdy, and weirdo best friend, my ideal mate basically, to a cruel asshole who accused me of emotionally abusing him from the very start of our relationship. When he is the one who made contact with me. He is the one who said, "I love you" first. He is the one who said we would have a future together first. He is the one who planned all of these wonderful things together for us, to be working partners and things like that. Whilst at the beginning of our relationship, I was terrified of getting close to someone like that again after my previous experiences because of my trauma, etc. In fact, I thought I was broken and perverted for being attracted to a person after 2 weeks, when in fact it's completely normal for most people. He's also the one who first suggested we exchange long romantic handwritten letters to one another, and the letters I have kept from him are insanely beautiful and full of love. The most beautiful things that someone has ever written or said to me. But anyway, the truth is that he started following my channel back in December of 2020. He started leaving strange comments here and there. I remember some of them. Apparently, he even left pretty out there messages on my Instagram, which I never received. And those comments were left under the name of Boris. That's his legal name. That was supposed to be his author name. Maybe it will be in the future if he actually manages to publish anything. And you know what? For the sake of fairness and transparency, my full name is Muriel Trail. You won't find much about me on the internet, but I do have aspirations to publish a memoir one day, and it will be published under that name, so it will become public. So there you go. My full name is Muriel Trail. But of course, I called him by his birth surname, which I won't give because he has family members. I don't want them to be bothered by this. And his first name, David. Some of his comments survive on a couple of my late 2021 videos. I'll show them right now. Then he told me verbatim that He just kind of became obsessed with me. He couldn't get me out of his mind. He tried not watching my channel, then would resubscribe, then unsubscribe, then resubscribe. And he realized he'd fallen in love with me, or I mean, the very first infatuation-like stages of falling in love, during the summer of 2021, so a full 3 months before he sent me his first long message on Goodreads, where he also, I might add, called himself a certified lunatic. I found that interesting and quirky at the time, but yes, he is indeed sadly, or certified no, he's not diagnosed, he's not treated for anything, but he should be, he is a lunatic. I don't like saying that, but that's the truth. Obviously, I didn't realize to what extent back then. We exchanged long messages, then spent hours on video calls because we were long distance, and he today reduced all of that to, I quote, wasting hours listening to your inane opinions. So everything that we talked about, all the things we geeked out over together, video games, literature, SFF literature, talking about personal lives, political ideas, all of that was my inane opinions, which he suffered through. Thank you, David. Yet I clearly recall him enjoying those sessions, those conversations, and wanting more of them when we became, for all intents and purposes, a couple. At first, we would only talk to each other in the evening, but then he wanted to have phone calls in the morning. Then he tried to reestablish a schedule because it was interfering with his writing, which, fair enough, I was extremely supportive of his writing, but he definitely wanted to spend time with me. He's just lying about everything. He listened to me talk about my past, my trauma, my history of mental illness. I never hid anything from him because I value honesty and transparency to an extreme degree. That's why I'm also honest about my history with abuse, with mental illness, with some of my more personal opinions when relevant, when discussing books that touch upon these things, because I value being transparent. I'm not gonna lie about who I am. I assume people watch my content and enjoy my book reviews and my opinions because, well, partly because they are genuine and they relate to them. But no, apparently I abused him emotionally from the very start, and he stayed with me out of conscience. Out of conscience. So he stayed with me for 3 months, then let me come to him in Scotland out of conscience. The only person who would do that, to my mind, is someone who is pathologically masochistic. So again, he's just twisting everything around. So he knew everything going in. I was honest, and I checked in with him regularly to see whether I was too much for him, because that's what I believe about myself. I believe I am too much for anyone, that I'm so broken and damaged that no one in their right mind would want to be in a close, intimate relationship with me. I'd just gone out of two and a half horrific years dealing with abysmal mental health, which I'm still dealing with, and trauma, and so I was terrified that he would find me, I don't know, ugly inside, just too broken, too damaged. So I always, made sure that he was okay, that he was comfortable with everything. I basically don't have any self-esteem as is, partly because of behavior like this in the context of intimate relationships, and I felt guilty every time I had a meltdown or a panic attack in his presence, whether long distance or when I was with him in Scotland. And guess what? Each time he was sweet, reassuring, supportive, he helped me calm down with breathing exercises. He even made a relaxation tape with his voice, with his words for me, as late as February, though according to him, he was just getting sick and tired of me, so what the fuck? I mean, I always said I'm gonna get better, I want to be better for you and for myself and fix myself, and he said, you don't even have to, I love you just the way you are. And he insisted I call him whenever I felt down, insisted I call him on video chat when I had meltdowns specifically, even though I wanted to hide away and not show what a mess I was during those times. I never asked for anything, basically. He offered all of it of his own volition. Materially, I never asked him to send me this 80 quid Kindle. I never asked him to spend 70 quid on this blanket for a Christmas present. I never asked him to take me to the restaurant in Edinburgh. I don't really like going out, which I'm sure will surprise no one who's slightly familiar with me from my videos. I'm an autistic, mentally ill, introverted mess, but he absolutely wanted to do this as a couple's ritual, which was really nice, and I appreciated that. He lent me money at some point, which I reimbursed in full, so yeah, I never asked him to buy my parents an expensive bottle of whiskey either, back when he looked forward to spending 2 weeks with me here. Basically, he said so specifically multiple times times he wanted to take care of me as I wanted to take care of him in my own way. I thought we had complementary ways that we could take care of each other. So he said he wasted thousands of hours of emotional labor on me, that I made him lose money when, like I said, I never asked for his expensive gifts and would undoubtedly have felt bad had I known the cost of them back when I received them, because that's the kind of person I am. He also said that I made him lose his fucking book series when I was nothing but supportive of his writing endeavors, and I looked forward to doing editing work for and with him and in the future. And the fact is, he is the one who decided to delete a year's worth of writing work, including the third draft of a novel. So basically a completed novel that needed some reworking, and a good third of the draft for his second novel. He deleted that, again, of his own volition, when he lost his mind, his personality, I might add, and broke up with me. He accused me of being incapable of agency, that I basically, enjoy being a victim is what that meant, I suppose, even though it's actually taken me 15 years to even recognize I was raped, because I never wanted to be that person. I don't like being a victim, but it fucking fits definitionally. He said that I was incapable of taking responsibility for my actions when he cowardly blames me for his despicably horrid behavior now, because he has also become a hypocrite. He even questioned what I told him about my abusive ex Philip, and fell just short of blaming me for that too. When in any case, I've done plenty of that on my own, because that's what abuse and trauma fucking do to you. And cherry on top of the cake, he called me abjectly useless. And a leech. Literally, he called me a leech. Because I am disabled, I am unemployed, but I am lucky enough, and I'm very grateful for that. I recognize the privilege I have in even getting access to this, to receive disability benefits. And it took me a long while to even feel worthy enough, I guess, to seek them. So apparently he's also become an ableist asshole, even though, once again, he said I was entirely entitled to the disability benefits a few months ago, that I shouldn't feel guilty for seeking them out, because of course I felt guilty. I have massive imposter syndrome, and that he would happily request disability money himself from the UK government if he ever received an ASD diagnosis, which I still think fits him, but along with a few other nastier diagnoses. Methinks now. And oh yes, he is also unemployed, with little savings because he blew most of the money he made working in IT as a software engineer. But I'm irresponsible. He also blamed my mother and said mean, pathetic things about her. My mother is the person I love the most in this world. She's the only person I love intensely in this world now, the only one. That was really nice too. When the fact is, he also profusely blamed his own parents for his own failings. His mother, especially, even though to all accounts she sounded like a perfectly nice person, perhaps a bit overwhelmed by having a lot of boys, I don't know. And I mean, he also admitted they weren't bad people or abusive in the slightest, but complicated feelings. And so he cut all contact with his family 4 years ago, changed his legal name in part to get away from them and to be unfindable by them, and all after another bad breakup and a mental breakdown. Yes, I'll admit, I am a dumbass, perhaps, in that I didn't consider it enough of a red flag. Hindsight is an absolute bitch. I'm apparently too socially stupid, weird, and worthless to be attractive to anyone but predators, old perverts, abusers, and people more severely mentally ill than I am. Anyway, what's the point of all this besides externalizing my pain and feelings and bothering you with it? To point out perhaps that falling for people online is dangerous or risky, I guess. It's not as if I didn't technically know that already, and besides, how the fuck people like me are supposed to meet others but online is beyond me. To warn other women that if they ever get contacted by a Boris Drakovist on r/books, r/fancy, or Goodreads, they should beware? Maybe, but oh my god, it hurts so much to even say that, because of how much of a beautiful person, my person, he was. Or perhaps it's to show the toxic power of gaslighting, emotional abuse, and emotionally cruel behavior, because I spent 10 minutes wailing earlier today, wondering if David wasn't right after all, if my ex Philip wasn't right after all, hell, if even my rapist Guy wasn't right after all, that I am an awful, weak, useless person, that I can't take responsibility for my actions, that it is all my fault. Even though, you know what, that's all I bloody do, given it took me 15 years to recognize my rape as such, and 3 years to recognize how toxic my ex was. Because I don't like feeling helpless. I don't like the label of victim. I feel responsible for things. I don't know, maybe it's a way for me to feel like I have some control over my life. I felt responsible for my relationship with Guy, so that's my rapist. I felt responsible for what happened with Philippe for a long time. And now I do wonder, was I emotionally abusive? That's how fucked gaslighting is. That's how pernicious it is. And because, you know, I need the truth to be said. I might be arrogant sometimes, I don't mean to be, but I guess it comes from being passionate about my opinions. Probably has something to do with me being autistic as well. I'll touch more upon this in a dedicated video for Mental Health Awareness Month. I'm definitely a massive, broken, alien weirdo. Whatever word you want to use. I am socially inept and useless in many ways, that is true. But at least, you know what, I'm not a liar. I am not a liar. I do my best to be honest, transparent, accurate about things. Accurate, specific, even when I do videos about books. If I make a mistake, I correct it. I make sure that the information I convey is understandable, that it is accurate when stating facts and things like that. I'm always honest when I'm not an expert in a subject, so even if I share my opinion, I will give a disclaimer that I'm not specifically versed in that topic, so I'm probably missing information. I really do my best. I try not to be arrogant, but I do my best not to lie, to be truthful. And I cannot abide someone telling lies about me and about my experiences, especially in the context of intimate relationships where I give my fucking all, because I've been cursed to feel things so bloody intensely. Perhaps also partly due to the autism, who the fuck knows. Sorry, I'm swearing a lot. I loved David with everything I had and was. It was the most beautiful, wholesome, and nourishing relationship I've ever had. While it lasted all of its 5 months, I choose to believe it was real, that the love I shared and felt with this person was real. And the he's become cannot take that away from me, however hard he tries. He has ripped my heart and soul to shreds. His personally is, for all intents and purposes, absolutely broken. And he is now a completely different, horrible person. The man I knew and loved has basically died. Or at least that's how I'm choosing to see it from now on. I have to grieve the death of my partner and try to be a better person, I guess. Though it all seems very pointless at times. Also, a quick, hopefully obvious note, please don't try and leave comments on his Instagram or bother him on Reddit. I honestly don't think the people who follow me are like that, though given what happened with David, and given that he was part of that group, what the hell do I know, I suppose, but I still need to state this clearly. Besides, he's inactive on every platform he can be found on. He probably just spends all his days and nights playing video games on Steam or League of Legends. He still carries the remnants of an MMORPG addiction he developed in adolescence. Quite frankly, it will be a miracle if he ever manages, in the state he's in, to write and publish anything. I know that sounds mean, but believe me, I feel sad about that because I really believe he has a lot of potential as a creative person, as a writer. And again, I was always supportive of him. I was always his biggest champion. Knowing how these things go, knowing it's scary, the parallels now that emerge between him and my ex, Philip, he'll probably end up homeless at some point, or sectioned, or do what he did to me to someone else. Or commit suicide. I hope not. Unless he gets psychiatric help, but I seriously doubt he will because he probably doesn't think he has a problem. Though I also think he's being extremely cruel, borderline sadistic to me now, because there's probably a remnant of conscience at the back of his mind whispering to him that he done fucked up and he can't reconcile that within his psyche, so he's turned me into the Wicked Witch of the West, basically. So like I said, that's kind of what happened to my ex, Philip, and he actually did have psychiatric help and still wound up alone, friendless, partnerless, still alcoholic, still depressed at the age of 50. And all of that makes me, as you can see, terribly sad. But I can't do anything for that person anymore. I can only leave him be, wish the monster he's become good luck, hope that things get better for him at some point in his life. And so again, just leave him be. Again, thank you to those of you who show me kindness and compassion when you don't even know me, not really. It really means a lot, even if I don't show it more overtly. Sorry for being emotional. I really hate being emotional in public. So I hope you'll forgive me that weakness. And of course, I hope my book-related content will continue to be interesting and satisfying to you all. So the truth of the matter is that there probably won't be a wrap-up video for the month of May. At the beginning of this month, I was again in a very, very dark place. I am generally in a very dark place, but like an extra dark place. I slept all day and sobbed continuously. Well, I mean, sobbed when I wasn't sleeping 3 days in a row and felt extremely suicidal. I just couldn't do anything at all. Then I kind of decided to just all out suspend my reading for a month to, one, work on finishing my bedroom renovations, which I did, and two, work on actually making videos again, which I'm in the process of doing. It's taking me longer than usual because A, shit mental health, and B, because I've chosen to script them in advance. I just cannot do them simply based off notes like I used to with the state I'm in most days. So for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be scripting videos and see how that goes in general. Better news, I plan on making 3 book reviews that I've mentioned in my past reading wrap-up and this one. So a series review for the Southern Reach trilogy, a dual review for Whit and the Wasp Factory, and a 3rd review for The Magicians. I also plan on making 2 videos for Mental Health Awareness Month. They will really be more personal rather than book related. So again, if you have no interest, I really don't take it personally. It's like, whatever, I'm gonna do them. If they are helpful to some people, good. One will be about my mental health, or rather mental illness journey/history. Another one will be about my autism journey. It still feels weird. I still have imposter syndrome even though I am now officially diagnosed, but maybe that's going to help with integrating all that and might be helpful to those questioning that whole thing. Of course, knowing myself, they'll probably be released late, in early June. Mental Health Awareness Month is May, and May is already halfway over, so yeah. But it's the thought that counts, right? I also have a more ambitious video project of making an overview of every single Le Guin book I've ever read to serve as a kind of reference reading guide for others. I have noticed a few of you specifically said they enjoyed my Le Guin content, so I figured this could be of interest and will help to more of you, to readers in general who want to get into Le Guin's work. Of course, it will take me a while, so don't expect it too soon. I will also have a short positive announcement. Well, I hope you'll think it's positive in a few days to a few weeks, but I'm keeping it a surprise for now. And finally, just again, thank you to every single one of you who subscribed to me since I joined BookTube 2 and something years ago, to everyone who likes to watch my content just from time to time without being subscribed as well. I'm glad I can do at least one thing that is appreciated by others. I do appreciate every like I get. I don't insist upon it because the idea of doing the whole please like and subscribe makes me feel weird and a bit hoary. I'm not saying any other YouTuber who does that is a whore, by the way. It's just my personal feelings. I just don't do that, but I do appreciate every like. I appreciate every new subscription I get. I really do, even if I don't really say much about it. And even more so, I appreciate mostly every comment I get. And on that note, a friendly reminder that I welcome long comments, mini discussions around books or themes within a book and the like, and I do my best to reply to everything when called for, when relevant. Or even if I don't reply because I don't think I have anything to add, I'll like a comment or love a comment. That's how I operate. Another reminder that I'm also present on Goodreads, where I mean, for the past few months now, I just tend to write at least a short something, if not an outright review for everything I read. If you would rather have opinions about literature in that format. And I also have an Instagram account where I post pictures of what I read, and what I've started doing again this past, yes, this past month, I now add to every picture post abbreviated versions of my Goodreads reviews for those books. So if you want to read about them in that way, you can. And all of those accounts are under my channel name, The Purple Bookworm. I am also on the Storygraph. I post all my Goodreads reviews to my Storygraph as well, but there is less interacting on that platform, and sue me, I do prefer the shelving system on Goodreads, even though it's owned by our friendly evil overlord, Amazon. But what you gonna do? So on that very final note, thank you, like I said. Sorry for getting emotional in that last section. I hope you all have a lovely day, evening, whichever time of day you prefer. Please do take good care of yourselves if you can. If you can't, then be kind to yourselves in whichever way you can. And I shall see you all, hopefully in not too long of a time, in another video. Bye-bye.